welcome to any visitors that may be with us today, and can I remind you there's tea and coffee down in the hospitality area after the church. I'll go through the intimations at the moment. First is Rona, of course, that's why I'm standing here. Rona's got a week off. She's up with her family in Inverness. Mark and Gillian are also away today, but they're down at St Andrews, where hopefully the Church of St Andrews may have a new minister from today. There is a sole nominee, Carl Irvin, preaching there for the post of minister. So hopefully, after today, and we wish them all the best and every prayer for that to happen, because it's now been, I think, 5 years they've been without a minister, so it'll be really good for both the congregations to have ministers working within the parish. Just go through the church news. Can I mention the Guild's WestFest, which is down in the hospitality area. Lots of lovely goodies for you to buy after the service. Also, can I mention the Do Justice to Christmas. This is Ubuntu's night, tomorrow night, in the centre from 6:30 to 8:30, and where you can buy a lot of your early Christmas shopping. If you want to do that, that would be lovely. Also, the Acorn Centre management team meets on Wednesday, the 6th of November at 6:30. And also we've got the Kirk session, which meets on Tuesday, the 12th of November at 7:30 in the Acorn Centre. I'll leave the other ones, but also, just to remind you, next Sunday is Remembrance Sunday. So the church will be starting at 10 o'clock next Sunday, where we will then go on down to the War Memorial about 10 to 11 for the service there. So next Sunday, 10 o'clock, not 11 o'clock as usual. Now, I'll pass you on to our good friend, who needs no introduction to you here at the West, the Reverend Bob Brown, to lead us in our worship today. Thank you, Bob.
Good morning. Thanks very much indeed to you for the invitation to be here again. It's always a pleasure to come here and share in the worship with you. I was given a row for the weather when I arrived, but I think I had failed. I just confessed I had failed. But it's better here than it was in Aberdeen, I can tell you. But there we go. Let us worship God, God the Father of creation. Hymn 113.
Created was
You are creator and sustainer of all that is, O God, but you are no unmoved mover or distant observer of what goes on across the earth. You are the hidden presence in our lives, closer to us than breathing. You are involved in the mix and mess of our living, yearning for us to know your loving concern. But too often your presence is unacknowledged, your word is not heard, your purpose is ignored, for we are easily distracted and drawn away from the things that make for our peace. Other gods seduce us, other values influence our lives, other baser instincts prevail. How long, O Lord, how long? Do not abandon us or hide your face from us. Do not give up on us or leave us to our own devices. Rather, turn us again to him who is the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus, the man for others, we call your Son. May his story be so much part of our story that the story of who we are cannot be told without reference to him. And may his Spirit be at work in us and among us to enable us to bear the fruits of the Spirit. So may we become the people you mean us to be, salt of the earth and light to the world, for your love's sake. Amen. I'm going to say a name and you can tell me who this is. Sia Khaleesi.
South African captain.
Captain of the South African rugby team. Sia Khaleesi. And of course they won the World Cup yesterday. And despite all the optimistic bravado of English commentators beforehand, England were well and truly thumped. Sia Khaleesi's story is a fascinating story because she's obviously the first black African to have captained the Springboks. He was brought up in poverty in one of the townships, born to teenage parents, so he was brought up by his granny. His parents died when he was 15 and his granny soon after. And when he was young, he used to sleep on a pile of cushions on the living room floor. 30 years ago, it would have been inconceivable that a man like Sia Khaleesi could ever play for South Africa, never mind be captain of it. Because, of course, during the apartheid years, the future for people like him was so limited. This is the third time that South Africa won the Rugby World Cup. And the previous two occasions they had one black player, and the second time 2 black players. And now, of course, they have a black captain. The man who was once the outsider is now the leader of the South African rugby team. And everyone who speaks about him speaks about how magnificent a human being he is, never mind a rugby player. It's a story about how the outsider has become an insider because of the new South Africa, black and white, together on equal terms. And I talk about him this morning because the outsider is going to be one of the things we're looking at in the sermon today and in the Bible readings. God's concern for the outsider and his concern that we share his attitude to the outsider are things we'll be looking on. But this morning, just now, if you would like to go and read the story of Sia Khaleesi, it's a really inspiring story. And the people of South Africa are hoping that what he has achieved in the rugby field will spill over into the culture and society in which they live. And what we call the Rainbow Nation will become even more truly a united nation. We sing together in hymn 213, Every New Morning.
The first reading is taken from Deuteronomy 24, reading from verses 17 to 22. Do not deprive foreigners and orphans of their rights, and do not take a widow's garment as security for a loan. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and that the Lord your God set you free. That is why I have given you this command. When you gather your crops and fail to bring in some of the corn that you have cut, do not go back for it. It is to be left for the foreigners, orphans, and widows, so that the Lord your God will bless you in everything you do. When you have picked your olives once, do not go back and get those that are left. They are for the foreigners, orphans, and widows. When you have gathered your grapes once, do not go back over the vines a second time. The grapes that are left are for the foreigners, orphans, and widows. Never forget that you were slaves in Egypt. That is why I have given you this command.
Holy Wisdom, Lamp of Learning, hymn 604.
Second reading is taken from Luke 19, verses 1 to 10. Jesus went on into Jericho and was passing through. There was a chief tax collector there named Zacchaeus, who was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but he was a little man and could not see Jesus because of the crowd. So he ran ahead of the crowd and climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus, who was going to pass that way. When Jesus came to that place, he looked up and said to Zacchaeus, "Hurry down, Zacchaeus, because I must stay in your house today." Zacchaeus hurried down and welcomed him with great joy. All the people who saw it started grumbling, "This man has gone as a guest to the home of a sinner." Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Listen, sir, I will give half my belongings to the poor, and if I have cheated anyone, I will pay him back 4 times as much." Jesus said to him, "Salvation has come to this house today for this man." I beg your pardon, I'll try that again. Jesus said to him, "Salvation has come to this house today for this man, also as a descendant of Abraham. The Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Amen.
According to my order of service, there is no sermon on this sheet. So I don't know, I'll just cancel this one. Let us pray. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. One of the older members of our own congregation I used to visit had served, like many men of his generation, in the forces during the war. He was called up at 18 into the Navy. And on one of the occasions I was speaking with him, I asked him if he had seen any bad things during his time in the service. And he thought for a moment and he said, yes, well, he said, we hit a mine off Holland and the ship was sunk. And I guess that was pretty bad. And he said at the end of the war with Japan, our ship was sent to the Far East to bring home people who had been prisoners of war of the Japanese. And some of them were in a terrible state. And he said that was bad. But he said the worst thing that I saw was on the 10th of May, 1945 in Bergen. The peace in Europe was the 8th of May, and 2 days later, his was the first ship into Norway after the German surrender. After they had docked, he and some of his chums went up into this town, and in the town square there was a whole crowd of people. And they were watching women getting their head shaved. And this happened not only in Norway, but in other countries in Europe. Because these were women who were collaborators, who had consorted with the German soldiers, and who now were having to pay for what they had done in the eyes of the other people. So here were these women being humiliated and despised in the town square by this hostile mob of people. And my friend said to me, that I think is the worst thing that I saw during the war. I would like you to imagine that in your mind's eye. The town square full of people watching women being brought forward, held down to have their heads shaved, humiliated and despised. And I want you to imagine Jesus coming through the square, walking up to one of the women and saying to him, I'm coming to dine with you today. Can you imagine the reaction of the crowd? And I say that because it helps us to understand the story of Zacchaeus. The key fact about Zacchaeus is that he was a collaborator. And like all collaborators, he was despised and hated by his own people. And we know he was a collaborator because he was a tax collector. And the way the Romans organised their tax was a system of tax farming. The state inspectors delegated the collection of taxes to agents, and the agents employed local people to take the taxes in. The story tells us that Zacchaeus was a superintendent of taxes, the only time the word is used in the New Testament, so he had a lot of people under him. Tax collecting was notorious for fraud and exploitation. And Jericho was a particularly good place to be a tax collector because there was a custom house there on the main road from Jerusalem across the Jordan. So Zacchaeus, the story tells us, was a very rich man, but he paid a heavy price for his wealth. He was not allowed to go to the synagogue. He could not testify or appear as a witness in court. He was classed as belonging to that group of people that God didn't care about, the harlots, the lepers, and the unclean. And his family was tainted with that same brush. So think how offensive this story was that's told about Jesus. Think how offensive it was to the people of his own day. Here is Jesus and the despised outsider coming together for a meal. And in that society, who you ate with was hugely important. If you incited someone to dine, then you were saying he was as a member of the family. If you dined with the wrong people, you were thought to be unclean. And there was nobody more wrong than Zacchaeus. I think there are two things in the story for us. The first is to do with our attitude to outsiders. Zacchaeus is the classic outsider, beyond the pale, shunned by the people of his own society. And the way Jesus responds to him is a challenge to us about how we respond to the outsider. Some outsiders are refugees, asylum seekers. And we are not very good to them because we put them into camps and they've no idea how long they'll be there or how this is going to turn out or whether they might be deported again. One of the issues in the Brexit argument was about foreigners. And there is absolutely no doubt at all about the Bible's attitude to that. In Deuteronomy, we read built into the religious law of the Jewish people was care for the widow, the stranger, and the orphan. So that when you were gathering your harvest, you didn't go back over it to make sure there was nothing left. You left stuff behind intentionally for the stranger, the widow, and the orphan. Several years ago, I was in a church delegation in Bosnia, not long after the Balkans War finished. And we were taken to a village in Bosnia to meet some people who wanted to see us. And when we got there, a man came up to me and in a Middle European English accent, which I won't try to imitate, he put his hands on my shoulders and said to me, "I belong to Glasgow." And I said to him, "Me too." But I said, "How come for you?" And he told me the story that in 1995, when the Serbian army had come sweeping through Bosnia, he came to Britain as a refugee and he was sent to Glasgow, where he lived for 3.5 years, himself and his family. And he said that people could not have been kinder. And I don't think I ever felt prouder to be Scottish than I did at that moment in Bosnia, where this man told me how much it had meant to him, fleeing from his own country, to be taken in and welcomed as one of their own in Glasgow. This is a story about our attitude to the outsider. Whether the outsider is a foreigner, whether the outsider has someone with a handicap or a learning difficulty, whatever puts someone outside the pale makes it difficult for them to belong. This is a story for us about that issue. The second thing about this story is it's a story about discipleship. Zacchaeus is the model disciple. Just look what happens in the story. Zacchaeus does not invite Jesus to dine with him. Jesus invites himself to dine with Zacchaeus. And this stresses the initiative of Jesus in reaching out to Zacchaeus. And the response of Zacchaeus, the story tells us that he came down from the tree very quickly, full of rejoicing, to go and dine with Jesus. And this is a theme that runs all through Luke's Gospel. This theme of God's initiative reaching out to people and the response of joy and happiness in the people who are aware of it. So in the birth stories, the stories about Jesus being born, we're told that the baby leapt for joy in the womb. And the angels come and say to the shepherds, "I have glad tidings of great joy for you." This is a story about God's initiative, God's gracious coming to us. And the response of faith is a response of generosity and joy. Zacchaeus is not asked to give any of his money away. Jesus doesn't say to him, "Now, Zacchaeus, I want you to repay the people you've cheated and the people you've stolen from." Zacchaeus himself takes that action because this is his response to the lavish generosity of God in Jesus. He in turn becomes lavishly generous to people he has cheated. And that's what it means to be a disciple. To be a disciple is someone who is aware of the lavish generosity of God and in response becomes generous and joyful in return. So if we meet Christian people who are mean of attitudes, mean of spirit, mean with money, they are denying the faith. If we meet Christian people who are despondent and despairing, they are denying the Christian faith. Because what it means to have faith is to respond with generosity and joy to the lavish generosity of God. And one last thing. The story makes much of the fact that Zacchaeus was a small man in height, and the only way he could see Jesus was to climb the sycamore tree. Who climbs trees? Children climb trees. Old men don't climb trees. And what has Jesus said in the preceding chapter? Except you become like a child, you cannot enter the kingdom of God. Zacchaeus epitomizes that childlike trust. That is the challenge to every disciple of Jesus. So this story speaks to us very, very directly once we unpack it a wee bit. It speaks to us about our attitude to the outsider, whatever form that outsider may take. It speaks to us about the generosity of God to us that has brought us into the community of faith, and the joyful generosity he is looking for in response. And it speaks to us of what it means to be a child in the kingdom of God. Amen, and may God bless to us this word preached in his name, and to his name be the glory and the praise. Jesus Christ is waiting, hymn 360. Let us pray. You have been with us from the beginning, O God. Yet people often wonder where we are to find you and how we are to know you. You have never been absent from the earth. Yet people often think we live in a God-forsaken world, in a vast and empty universe. But our conviction is that in the story of Jesus, You have made your presence known and your voice heard in a special way. And knowing him, our lives are forever changed. We are no longer turned inwards, concerned only for ourselves, but turned outwards to see with the eye of faith and respond with the heart of faith to the needs of others. And the offering we have laid on this table is a sign of that commitment. We hold before you today those set in authority over us who make decisions that affect all our lives and shape the society we live in. May they be motivated not by self-interest, but by concern for the common weal. May they be guided by the spirit of wisdom and vision to protect the weak and the vulnerable, welcome the stranger and create community where each person is valued and everyone has a contribution to make. We hold up to you for blessing those who are victims of unscrupulous people in today's slave trade. Those who live with the consequences of having made bad choices. And those who live with the guilt and shame of having done wrong to others. Bring down the schemes of evil men and enable us to help your kingdom's cause. We remember before you now those who wait for news they fear will be too hard to take. Those who collude with wrong by remaining silent, and those who suffer because of their silence. Strengthen the feeble knees and straighten the backs that are bent. And we ask you to bless the peacemakers, those who strive to break down walls of hostility and seek to limit the worst of man's inhumanity to man. Those who speak for those who cannot speak for themselves and defend those who cannot defend themselves. Tear down tyrants from their thrones and promote your purposes of justice and peace. Lord, hear our prayer and let our cry come to you in the name and for the sake of Jesus Christ our Lord, in whose words we pray together, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed. May your kingdom come, may your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today what we really need. Forgive us the wrongs we do as we forgive those who wrong us. Lead us away from temptation. Keep us safe from evil. For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours forever. Amen. Hymn 247, Moved by the Gospel. Let us move.